Welcome to Reminac TV. This is our creating writing course that we're going to be taking on. This is our first episode of our premiering series. My name is Peter and I'll be your facilitator. Now, this is a project just like many that you've been seeing on Reminac TV, which by the way you should subscribe to in case you've not. Among the projects that we've been carrying on, and this is a creative writing course that we want to collaborate alongside our readers of our written work, our comic books, and everything that we try to put our hands on. It's going to be quite interactive, but that will come in a little bit later with the age of the production, and we hope to have the best of the time as you view. Now, we're going to keep this as simple as possible because we are trying to target the kids out there to help them learn how to write even better. To write good stuff, to write about an exploration that they need to have expressed through the writing. Okay, so I'm going to take you through how we're going to run in this creative writing project with Reminac TV. So we are going to have, of course, the introduction, which you could have told already I'm talking about, and then we are going to look at a few things that really make writing fun and a little bit effective and productive. So if you've been writing and just writing for fun, now it's high time you started to write for effectiveness and with a purpose, as we shall see later when we come to the writing process. Cool. All right, so our first part is going to be the introduction as per the course outline, and then we shall go to we won't have any assessment, but we really would appreciate to have your feedback. If immediately after watching these videos you go into the comment section, you can leave a comment what you want us to talk about in case you have any questions, which would be addressing in the following episode. Okay, so we shall be making an introduction to fiction, which we are going to start up with, and we shall have the point of view of the writer, we shall have the style following, then we shall go to the actual writing process, and then we shall have a recap of what we would have covered by then we shall have we shall get involved into writing a story where we shall deal with the structure, the pattern, the theme or the idea, and also the message. Now these are the things that you want to keep at the back of your mind as you start off to write. Then later on, at the conclusion of this season, we shall try to do a practical bit of writing. We shall introduce the poetry part alongside short stories before we go to the biggest genres of creative writing, and then we shall of course conclude with the poetic octet for this very particular season. Very well, so that's how we are going to roll, and I want to kick in right away to creative writing. Now, what is creative writing? With contemporary age and era, we've adopted the term creative writing to mean the formally predominantly known literature. Literature is dying off as a term because it involves very many things now. If someone needs a hymn book, that's a literature to them. If someone needs a record of music, sheet music, that's literature. If it's a choir assembled together, what they use to read, they call it literature. So we have elevated from that to narrow it down and also create a term for it to be creative writing. As you hear creative writing, you create through writing. Not every writing is creative writing. You must be working with, answering questions in papers. You must be working with answering, paragraphs and paragraphs of, or writing paragraphs of essays. Well, that doesn't really qualify as much to be creative writing, apart from a later development when your genre is an essay creatively. That is a whole other set of idea altogether. But now this is any writing that goes outside the bounds of normal writing. And when we talk about normal writing, we are talking about the journalistic writing, we are talking about the letter recording. It takes on a very technical term of skill, but also art and talent. So you write creatively and you come up with something that you think will motivate or inspire your thoughts or expressions. It really bases much on what we call tropes, and to maybe explain tropes is what you must have heard people call figurative language, and that will bring me to the bit of language. Some people have always confused English language or any language to literature. Now, where is the difference? Literature, or creative writing for that part, is based on language in use, practical language application. And what does this mean? That if you want to write, you do not only need to have the talent, but you must have the language control. It's one thing to speak the language, it's one thing to write the language, but also another thing to really have control of the language. You have to be extremely expressive with the language for you to be a very successful creative writer. So we're talking about figurative language, where we have imagery, we have symbolism, we have hyperbole, we have personification, all the things we are going to look at. No need to worry, and I'll try to break them down as much as possible. We are going to reach a section that has poetry, but for former days, poetry basically meant literature, until when we narrowed it into a genre of its own, as many more genres kept on coming out, and we are going to see these kinds. Talking of genres, literature or creative writing takes on a number of formats, and among these formats we have plenty of them, but we prefer categorizing them into two categories. We have the non-fiction and the fiction part, which most people enjoy the fiction part because, well, sometimes they are lies that are creatively brought to life. But still, we have subcategories in these categories. When you look at the fiction, for example, this is where we have the short stories in most cases, where we have the poetry itself. Regardless of whether it's based on a true event, it takes a particular form of fiction to it. Then we have the fantasy. If you've read the Cinderella stories, if you've read the Sleeping Beauty, all those things, that's fantasy and it belongs to the fiction part. We have the drama, the plays, the things that you see being acted and all those things, movies, and that's why I'll be making great references to movies that have been developed out of books. For example, I'll talk about the Harry Potter, Animal Farm, but also the Lord of the Rings for that matter. We have the novel form, which splits in very many things, basing on the theme and the idea and the message and the plot or the storyline that is being taken. A romance, maybe a tragedy, for example, or maybe it could be a sci-fi, a science fiction, or basically a fantasy. Now, in the next season, we shall explain these things better and even broadly than now. So all you have to know is the basics that we are introducing. Then what we have in the non-fiction part. In the non-fiction part, we have, you have heard of the biographies and the autobiographies, things that are written about someone, that's a biography. But if someone writes about themselves, that's an autobiography. We have the letters. Now, a break about the letters. Some texts, some literary texts, some literature texts or writers have borrowed the letter to be a mode of style. But that is quite subjective, more subjective to what you're reading, where a writer is intending to communicate something through a letter. But when the entire book is not a letter, now that becomes a technique that they adopt. However, when it comes to nonfiction, letters are part of that category. Then we will also have the magazines. Yes, the magazines. Now, magazines may include stories and all those things, but predominantly they are nonfiction. They cover things that we know about and that surround us. Then we have the diaries or the journals and all those things, nonfiction, because just like autobiographies and biographies, they seem to be personal and all those things. Now, I want us to note carefully before I go to the next thing. Language usage is very important when you are writing. And that's why when we reach the poetry part, we shall talk about what we call the poetic license. The poetic license, a license that gives you the freedom to use the language the way you want. To use language the way you want, to formulate language the way you want, as long as it's understandable by the readers and the speakers of that language. Very well. Moving on, let me talk about the writing process. People tend to assume that to be a writer, you just need to write, which is quite true. And we are all writers. We are all writers. Even when you just, have yourself down on the ground, get, I don't know what, charcoal or a piece of chalk and scribble down something you're writing. But effective writing and developmental writing, you have to really indulge yourself into the depth of its process. And this starts with your planning. I'm saying this considering the fact, leaving it constant, that you already have something you want to write about. Because I'm not going to say you must have an idea that you want to write about. No. One scholar said that a writer sheds all the itch on paper. If you have something that you really feel like it's bothering you, you have a problem with, and I'm leaving this disclaimed, maybe the government or maybe a particular party or maybe a particular person, and you really can't attack them, you would want to write everything down. That's why we have colonial writing, then post-colonial writing, then contemporary writings, and all those things coming up, because issues keep changing over time. So you have to deal with the process of writing. But the biggest part of it all is for you to have a plan. Plan how you want your written piece to be. Plan how you want it to appear, from the beginning to the final product that you are going to deal with. Then you will consider about the characters you want to involve, the kind of language you want. Is it elevated? Do you want simple language? Do you want extremely complicated language? That is all involved in planning. The characters you want, the setting where you want your stories or your writing to really take place, and all those things. So you have to really have a plan that comes up with you before you start writing, and then you can start with the excitement. It's not a very easy thing to do. Writing has never been easy, but for very particular reasons, it's really a thing that pays off. I wish I could tell you that it's very easy. No, because it takes time, it takes commitment, but also the love for it. If you lack those, it's a failed project for some reasons. Why? Because we want you to be as closely attached to what you're writing as possible. Okay. For benefits of references, I'm going to, before we even go further with this season of creative writing, we are going to be making references back and forth within the following texts. My team and I thought we should work with Animal Farm. Why? Because, well, it should be, apart from my producer who says he has not watched the movie, neither has he read the text. So I'm assuming you guys are quite different. And so we are going to deal with Animal Farm. Why? Because of its dual structuralism. Then we are going to talk about a little bit of Harry Potter. My producer said I should also talk about Oliver Twist, which I will do with intense pleasure. Then we shall also use The Lord of the Rings. You don't need to really read about it so much. You can watch the movie, it's okay, but I would rather you read, if possible, you read Animal Farm, because within the next season we are going to be dealing a lot with creative writing in practice. That aside, I'll also be using a lot of poetic or rather poetry pieces to describe a few things. I will mix up. I'll use African poets and poetesses, but also Western writers. You know, it will depend on the efficiency and effectiveness of the piece, you know, and all that it has to offer. So for that matter, we shall use Song of Chickens by Jacques Mapange. We shall also use Song of a Cow by Professor Timothy Wangusa. We shall also use other poems. For some reasons, I'll also use my own written pieces from my collection of The Gorgeous Glory. For example, The Lover's Confession, which is basically to talk about arrangement, but also personification, for that matter. Then also we shall use the Swan for a structure, for man's structure. Yes, so all the things should be kept in the back. I would really appreciate if you can get yourself a copy of these things, or you could download them from the internet or just read them from the internet. They are available pieces. It would be amazing, so that we all have a language that we speak, we can follow up each other, and to have fun while doing this. Okay, so this is it for now. I hope to see you guys tune in for the next episode. My name is Peter, together with Reminac TV. Please guys, don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell. We need to notify you whenever something pops in. Thank you so much. Write your world. Bye.